I've come to the realization that there's one thing that if you don't become aware of and take action towards, you will grow and self-develop very little or not at all. And this doesn't just include in the area of spirituality, it also includes all other areas. We can put it into the area of the physical, the mental, the emotional. Really, not becoming aware and applying this into the different areas of your life really will stunt your growth. The good news, however, is when you do become aware of this and you begin to gently implement it in your life, all areas in your life improve. That includes your health, your finances, your relationships, your peace of mind, and so on. So what is this one thing? And more importantly, how is it we can remove the block that is preventing this thing from taking effect in our lives so that we can grow into who we truly can become? Now, it's actually very simple, but not always easy to implement. But don't worry, not only am I going to tell you what it is and why it's so crucial, but I'm also going to go over some of the best ways you can start to gently implement it into your own life. So the one thing that blocks so many people from really much growth at all is this: a lack of awareness of the different levels of consciousness. Now, before you start asking questions or go, why is that, or even what is that, let me explain why this is one of the biggest stunts to growth, and also what you can do so it no longer becomes that for you and actually is a catalyst for your own development. So first and foremost, understand that there is something called the Hawkins scale of consciousness. The scale was created by David Hawkins based on his incredible life work, where he actually learned how and did calibrate different levels of consciousness. And he managed to calibrate the level of consciousness from shame all the way up to enlightenment and everything else in between, and what it means, how it works, and how it actually impacts your life. I'm also going to be going over how you can move up the scale, which will start to automatically benefit you and improve your life. So the first thing I want you to realize is that the higher up the scale you go, the more of your own power you tap into. You can think of it this way: the higher up the scale you go, the more empowered you become. And the lower you live on the scale, the more disempowered you are. The way Hawkins put it is, the more you go up the scale, beyond 200 in fact, and above, the more anabolic your life becomes, which just means life supporting. And the lower you go, especially the ones below 200, the more catabolic your life becomes, which simply means life destroying. So with that in mind, it goes without saying that it definitely will benefit us to learn how to really start existing and living more in those anabolic states, which once again are life supporting states of being. So as you can see, the anabolic states include states such as wisdom, acceptance, enlightenment, love, joy, clarity, and peace. And like I already alluded to, these states actually begin at the level of 200, which is courage. Makes sense, right? Because in order to go against the mainstream and to really move to the higher levels of consciousness, which is less common, you need courage to do it. Unfortunately, most people exist and live most of the time from the states below 200, which are things like pride, anger, all the way to fear, shame, guilt, apathy, and similar states. And again, these are the catabolic, life-destroying states, the ones that if you sustain and stay in, it starts to break down your life in all areas, financially, physically, and health especially, and spiritually. Now, let's actually address that really quick before moving on. Why are most people on the planet right now actually existing and living in states below 200? Well, it's actually very simple. It's the reason this one thing blocks you from really receiving much growth at all in your life. And that simply is, people are not aware of the levels of consciousness. They're not aware that they've been calibrated, and they're not aware, especially since they're not aware of those first two things, that they can actually apply this in their own life to raise up that consciousness scale. So very few people are aware of this work, the implications of it, and like I said, it means they're not applying it. Hawkins even found that during his research that just becoming aware of consciousness and the scale and your ability to move up the scale expands your consciousness. And also, we didn't learn things like this in school. You know, we learned other things that most of us didn't benefit from. In fact, I would go as far to say that in school and a lot of the way in which many of us were raised, we were taught how to, in fact, live in fear, live in guilt, live in apathy, live in anger, and live in pride. Although not impossible, it's very hard to move up the consciousness scale or to really expand your consciousness when you're not aware of this. You don't need to necessarily know this scale, but to not be aware that that's a possibility, it makes it very difficult to even expand your consciousness. However, for you, viewer, watching this video, by watching it, not only have you received a powerful catalyst that can help you move forward in this journey of raising your consciousness, but just the mere fact that you're watching this, and if you watch it all the way to the end, this awareness will give you an initial boost in raising your consciousness right away. And I'm also going to give you some things that can, over time, allow you to move up that scale. So let's jump into it. So I'm actually going to give you an even simpler framework you can use to gauge what level of consciousness you're in. So we're going to call the level of 20 or 30, which is shame and guilt, up to the level of 100 as to-me consciousness. This is simply victim mode. This is when you think and move from a place of life happens to me. It is one of the most disempowering consciousness states to be in, and again, it's what most people individually on the planet are in right now. Now, level 125, which is the consciousness state of desire, to 175, which is pride, we can categorize as by me level of consciousness. Now, by me, you can think of as make it happen consciousness. Life happens by me. Now, the reason this is actually higher up than the to-me states, and actually a more preferable state to be in, despite still being in the catabolic states, is because in by me, you start taking more personal responsibility for your life. You start taking more action, which allows for more consciousness raising, more results, and more feedback. Where it lacks in your journey and why it's still catabolic is because it usually goes against life. Fighting against life, I'm going to make it happen, and a lot of times will come from a certain level of superiority. This is a state that's not great to be sustained either, and it's kind of the hustle grind mode that leads to so many people feeling burnt out, developing disease from stress, and similar things like that. One thing I like to think about this state is it's okay to be in it, to use it as a stepping stone to get to the next thing, at least if you look from the context of your journey up the consciousness scale. But if you fight life, life will fight you back, and it has a 100% winning record to anyone who's faced up to it. Okay, so that's to me and by me level of consciousness. Now let's talk about one of the most crucial states, one of the most crucial consciousness places to be that acts as a catalyst for so much growth in your life. And that is the consciousness level of 200, which is courage. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a lot of times the catalyst for getting to those higher levels of consciousness. When you live a life of courage, you start to flip the switch to allow the magic of life to start coming in. Essentially, being able to live from that state of 200 from courage almost guarantees you're going to more quickly and effectively move up the consciousness scale to states like acceptance, willingness, peace, joy, love, wisdom, and similar states. This is when you begin to stop listening to your small self and listen to your higher self. This is when, even if you are nervous or you're in a state of fear, but there's something in your heart you want to go do, you do it anyway, even if the fear is there. And through courage, as you go up the consciousness scale, you start getting to the next state, which in my eyes is the most preferable one, which is called through me. So remember, to me is life happens to me, by me is life happens by me, and through me is life happens through me. And this means you are cooperating and co-creating from a place of coherence and harmony with life. Here's another way you can picture it. If to me is someone who's so afraid they never get in the river of life, or they're holding onto a rock in the river of life, by me is someone who is swimming upstream against life trying to make it happen. Through me is someone who is let go, is going with the current of the river, and because they're doing that, they have the whole power of the river at their back as they cooperate, co-create, and really move in coherence and harmony with natural laws. And this is when life begins to work through you. It will start to bring you easily more inspiration, people, circumstances, intuitive moves, intuitive hits, downloads that will help you on this journey. And just imagine for a second what your life would look like in every area if you genuinely lived, let's say 95% of the time, in states like joy and gratitude and love and abundance and peace. Okay, so now you have a greater idea of how where you are on this consciousness scale will affect your life through the to me, by me, and through me frame. That's great, but how can we actually ascend up out of the to me and by me states into through me, or just start living, if you're already in through me, in that more often? So here is how we can start moving up the consciousness scale. First, I want to reiterate something I've been mentioning throughout this video, and it's understanding the difference of where you are living versus where you are visiting. And essentially, you want to identify where you are spending most of your time on this scale. And that includes not only consciously, but what are your default patterns unconsciously? Are they that of through me, by me, or to me? Because you may visit certain states, you may vacation there, but that's very different than living there. Having this awareness will give you a really good starting point of where you're at so that you can then start to ascend and start doing the things that will help you to climb. The next thing to understand is something I mention a lot, but it's always worth repeating because it just isn't changing anytime soon, if ever. And that is, this is an inner game. The outer world follows the inner. So I would invite you to just take stock on how often you are cultivating the inner world through inner work. This would include, for example, how much time and energy are you spending to learn concepts like this and then applying them in your life? How often are you sitting in silence and meditation? Are you engaging in letting go techniques to remove certain things that are preventing you from climbing up the scale? Are you working on emotional mastery? Are you doing breath work or different things that you're drawn to? The technique itself isn't always what's important, but are you doing the inner work that you're intuitively being led to, and are you doing it consistently, or are you prioritizing other things that are in the physical? And again, it's not right or wrong, whatever you do. All I'm going to say is it's extremely difficult to raise your consciousness and go up this scale if you're not investing time and energy into the inner work. There's two more things I want to mention very quickly that are going to help you go up this scale. First is using the feedback of life not to victimize yourself, but to use it in order to be a catalyst for your own growth. A great perspective shift or mindset shift to do with this is, instead of thinking things are happening to you or life is happening to you, really come from the perspective of life is happening for me. This will change your perspective and lens from looking for everything that is wrong with what's happening to looking for the lesson or the gold or the feedback in every situation. Again, life is just providing feedback. One of the greatest ways I've heard this said was from a mentor I have named Rory, and he said, anytime you're on your spiritual journey, going down the spiritual path, and you fall and scrape your knee, start digging for the gold. Life is simply trying to show you something or tell you something, not torture you. Become curious to find out what life is leading you towards, and you'll never see life as acting to you or life happens to me again. And then the simple thing from there to do is to then take corresponding and aligned action based on the feedback that life is giving you. Finally, and possibly one of the most impactful ones, is to find a system that helps you go through this process and also hold you accountable so you don't kind of go stop-start with it. Why is this so important? Again, because it's where you're living versus where you're visiting. If you get into a program that helps guide you through the process, is run by someone who has been there and done that, which means they're living in through me or know how to get to that point because they've done it themselves. They will help to keep you in those higher states, to work through the things that are blocking you from doing it, instead of you running away because you don't have that accountability. A lot of people don't change because they give up way too early in the process, or they're always stop starting because as soon as it gets uncomfortable, they run back to their comfort zone, which almost always exists in the to me or by me levels of consciousness. A proven system that expands consciousness and has a proven way of helping you do that will make it so that you're living in those higher states of consciousness more often, to the point where you transform to being there as a lifestyle. Now, if you are interested in a proven 6-month transformation program that I run, where the goal is to get you from the caterpillar to the butterfly, from to me, by me, to through me, so you're living there, you can check out my free Facebook group down below called the Elite Transformation Experience, where you can learn more and get some other stuff as well just for being in that group. Now, one of the biggest struggles, besides what we talked about in this video that I see so many people going through, is not knowing how to manifest wealth and abundance in their own life, which is definitely something that will stunt a lot of people's growth. So if you fall into that category, I would go watch this video next if you want to learn from a very ethical, very high conscious place how to attract abundance, wealth into your life. So that would be a really good follow-up video to watch after this one.